Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He's a member of the January 6th investigation. He also, of course, is chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, sir, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's nice to have you here.
Good to be with you.
Let me start by asking you first about what's going on with this subpoena to the Secret Service. A lot of this drama unfolded late last week, including the Inspector General of the department that oversees the Secret Service coming in, and I understand briefing you and all of your colleagues on the committee about what may have happened at the Secret Service when they faced a request for information from their department related to January 5th and 6th. What can you tell us about the status of this sort of conflict with the Secret Service and what you're expecting to get in response to that subpoena?
Well, my understanding at present, and this is still very much an ongoing investigation, is that some of these text messages were either lost or destroyed. And now, whether they were lost or destroyed because of negligence or willfully, we have yet to determine. But there's a very strong conflict between what we're hearing from the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security and what the Secret Service is telling the public. I have to say that statement that we saw from the Secret Service, that basically there were messages lost, but none of them pertain to what we're investigating. I don't know how, if they're lost, you can draw that conclusion with such confidence. So something doesn't seem quite right. And we hope to find out as soon as tomorrow what has been preserved, what was lost, and begin to find out some of the circumstances in which those messages may have been discarded.
We're getting a little more information tonight about what to expect on Thursday. Obviously, it's a decision of some consequence in its own right that the hearing on Thursday will be in prime time. You can expect a larger audience for that, and I think expect larger expectations to go along with that. We also have been told to expect a couple of, at least it's been reported, a couple of live witnesses who were both inside the Trump White House in fairly high-level positions leading up to and including the days around January 6th. What should we understand in terms of how close to the end you are? We keep hearing from you and other members of the committee that there's still more to find out. There's still more to get to the bottom of, that the investigation has turned up a lot of stuff actually in recent days since the hearings have been in public. At the same time, it does seem like this is going to be the last public hearing for quite some time.
You know, I think at the beginning of this process, when we were scheduling and sketching out the hearings, we did conceive of this as probably the end of this first set of hearings, even while we were considering another set of hearings in the fall that were focused on our recommendations for protecting the democracy going forward. But as we've gone along and new witnesses have come forward and we've added hearings like we did with Cassidy Hutchinson, we realized that witnesses continue to come forward. And we may very well be adding other hearings to accommodate new evidence, new testimony. You know, we haven't made firm conclusions about that. We want to give ourselves the freedom and flexibility to present to the public whatever we feel the public really needs to know. I think in the next hearing, you will hear a combination of live testimony. You'll hear part of a video testimony that you haven't seen before. And most importantly, as we've done in other hearings, we will try to weave it together so that people understand just what happened during that lengthy period of time when Donald Trump sat in the White House and watched the Capitol being attacked.
In terms of that timeline, one of the reasons that I'm thinking anew about the overall timeline of your investigation is this memo that we just obtained from Attorney General Merrick Garland. It's an all-employees memo from the Attorney General to everybody at the Justice Department, reminding them about election year sensitivities, reiterating the kind of advice we've seen from previous attorneys general about the department not taking any steps in election season that might look like they were designed to effectuate some particular outcome or advantage or disadvantage some candidate or some political party. He also, though, goes a step further and says that Attorney General Bill Barr's advice from February 2020 is still in effect and is still Justice Department policy. And that new guidance from Bill Barr as of February 2020 said that any investigation involving a declared candidate for president had to be personally cleared through the Attorney General in writing. A declared candidate for president or anybody working at a senior level for somebody in that position. With Donald Trump now openly sort of mulling the prospect of declaring himself once again to be a candidate for president, I wonder if you and your colleagues on the committee feel pressure at all in terms of the time ticking. The Justice Department, by policy, is a little more reticent and has puts more hurdles in the way of bringing any sort of federal prosecution or even opening federal investigations of people who are declared candidates. We're getting closer and closer to that each day with Trump. Is that affecting your thinking about the timing here?
Well, we are moving on, I think, as expeditiously as we can. So I don't know how much it will affect our own timing. But it does, I think, again, raise the question of why the Justice Department was so slow to pursue these other lines of effort to overturn the election. They did seem to proceed with alacrity when it came to those breaking into the Capitol. But with respect to all of these other lines of effort, the effort to pressure state legislators into finding votes that didn't exist, or the fake elector plot, or the pressure campaign against the vice president, any number of other efforts which many, like Judge Carter in California, believe violated the law, why it appears only now that that is given a sense of urgency. I will say this to add on to what Andrew Weissman was saying. It is a bit rich to be citing Bill Barr for anything that has to do with the independence of the Justice Department, considering how badly he disrupted the independence of that office. Yes, we're glad that Bill Barr finally found a line he wouldn't cross, but he crossed a lot of lines before he got there. And I agree, that's not the precedent I would cite, even if that's the policy which the new Attorney General wants to adopt. Finally, Rachel, I agree with the assessment, whether it's based on this memo or otherwise, that Donald Trump believes, among other things, that running for president is lucrative, but it also may help him stay one step ahead of the jailer.
Yeah, and whatever the obscure and contested derivations of the Justice Department's decision to not bring to not bring prosecutions against people who are serving as president of the United States, whatever the derivations are of that policy, former President Trump feels very, very, very aware of it and seems to be factoring it into his future political plans. In the midst of your investigation. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, member of the January 6th investigation, chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Sir, it's always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for making time tonight.
Thank you.